Hello and welcome to this video entitled A Trick, Not a Treat. So with Halloween just hours away, you're probably asking yourself, so what's the big deal about black cats and witches and goblins and ghosts and jack-o'-lanterns and that bobbing for apples thing? Well, and then how about that million-dollar question, is Halloween a satanic holiday? Well, we're going to be answering those questions in this one of a two-part series. So I want you to sit back because we're going to take a look at the origins of the second largest commercial holiday next to Christmas. Don't go away. We'll be right back. So, what's Halloween all about? Is it trick or treat or neither? Well, we're going to find out in a minute, but before we get started, I need you to do three things for me. Number one, I'm going to be picking your brain with some questions, and you will be able to respond in the comment box below as we go along. Number two, before you leave, please be sure that you click on that thumbs up button. And number three, be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you will know about all the information and upcoming videos, and that you can tune in and stay up to date with all the resources that I'm going to be offering to you. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. Halloween, also known as All Halloween, Hallows Eve or Saint Eve's, is an annual holiday that's celebrated each year on October 31st. And it just so happens that this Wednesday is Halloween, October 31st. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory designated November 1st as a time to honor all saints. Soon, All Saints' Day incorporated some of the traditions of Samhain. The evening before was known as All Hallows Eve, and so therefore later shortened to Halloween. Halloween has its roots in the pre-ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. Now, Samhain is spelled S-A-M-H-A-I-N, but it's pronounced Samhain. And it's celebrating the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter. The Celts, who lived 2,000 years ago in the area that is now Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France, believed that the dead returned to earth on Samhain, which was celebrated on the night of October 31st. Their new year actually began on November 1st. People would gather to light bonfires, offer sacrifices, and pay homage to the deceased. During some of the Celtic celebrations of Samhain, villagers disguised themselves in costumes made of animal skins to drive away phantoms and goblins and ghosts. Banquet tables were prepared with edible offerings left out to placate the palates of the unwelcome spirits. In later centuries, people began to dress themselves as ghosts, demons, and other malevolent creatures, performing antics in exchange for food and drink. This custom was known as mumming, and it dates back to the Middle Ages and is thought to be an antecedent of our trick-or-treating. Here is a modern-day description of the celebration of Samhain. The fields are bare. The leaves have fallen from the trees and the skies are going gray and cold. It's the time of the year when the earth has died and gone dormant. Every year on October 31st, the Sabbath we call Samhain presents us with the opportunity to once more celebrate the cycle of death and rebirth. For many pagan traditions, Samhain is a time to reconnect with our ancestors and honor those who have died. This is the time when the veil between our world and the spirit realm is thin, so it's the perfect time of year to make contact of the dead. So that was written by a current and modern day worshiper of Samhain. So here's your first question. What are some Halloween activities that come to your mind when you think about Halloween? Remember, leave your comments and your answers in the comments section below. Halloween activities include trick-or-treating or the related guising, attending Halloween costumes, parties, carving pumpkins into jack-o'-lanterns, lighting bonfires, apple bobbing, divination games, playing pranks, visiting haunted attractions, telling scary stories, and watching horror films. In many parts of the world, the Christian religious observance of All Hallows Eve includes attending church services and lighting candles on the grave of the dead. It still remains popular today. So, what are some symbols that come to mind as we talk about trick or treat? Well, let's look at trick or treat. Trick-or-treating, which is the tradition of going from house to house in search of candy and other goodies, has been a popular Halloween tradition in the United States and other countries for an estimated 100 years. But the origin of this community-based ritual, which costumed children typically savor while their cavity-conscious parents are grudgingly tagging along, remains hazy. The custom of trick-or-treating on Halloween may come from the belief that supernatural beings or the souls of the dead roamed the earth at this time and needed to be appeased. It is suggested that trick-or-treating evolved from a tradition whereby people impersonated the spirits or the souls of the dead and received offerings on their behalf. By the 9th century, Christianity had spread into Celtic lands, where it gradually blended with and supplanted older pagan rites. In 1000 AD, the church designated November 2nd as All Souls' Day, a time for honoring the dead. Celebrations in England resembled Celtic commemorations of Samhain, complete with bonfires and masquerades. Poor people would visit the house of wealthier families and receive pastries called soul cakes in exchange for a promise to pray for the souls of the homeowner's dead relatives. Known as souling, this practice was taken up by the children, who would go from door to door asking for gifts such as food, money, and ale. Here is your second question. When was the phrase trick or treat first coined? In Scotland and Ireland, young people took part in a tradition called guising, dressing up in costumes and accepting offerings from various households. Rather than pledging to pray for the dead, they would sing a song or recite a poem, tell a joke, or perform some other kind of trick before collecting their treat, which typically consisted of fruits, nuts, and coins. The treat was usually some form of candy, although in some cultures money was used instead. The trick refers to a threat, usually idle, but it would perform mischief on the homeowners or their property if they refused to offer a treat. Trick-or-treating usually occurs on the evening of October 31st. Some homeowners signal they're willing to hand out treats by putting up Halloween decorations outside their doors. Others will simply leave treats available on their porch for the children to take freely. In North America, trick-or-treating has been a Halloween tradition since the late 1920s. In Britain and Ireland, the tradition of going house to house collecting food at Halloween goes back at least as far as the 16th century, as had the tradition of people wearing costumes at Halloween. In 19th century Britain and Ireland, there are many accounts of people going house to house in costumes at Halloween, reciting verses in exchange for food, and sometimes warning of mischief if they're not welcomed. The Scottish Halloween custom of guising, children disguised in costumes going from house to house for food, is first recorded in North America in 1911 in Ontario, Canada. While going house to house in costume has remained popular among Scots and Irish, the custom of saying trick or treat has only recently become common. The activity is prevalent in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, the Republic of Ireland, Puerto Rico, and northwestern and central Mexico. So here's a did you know? Although it is unknown precisely where and when the trick-or-treat was coined, the custom has firmly been established in American pop culture by 1951, when trick-or-treating was depicted in the Peanuts comic strip. In 1952, Disney produced a cartoon called Trick or Treat, featuring Donald Duck and his nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. So, next thing, let's talk about those orange pumpkins, those jack-o'-lanterns that we see all over the place. So what's up with these carved pumpkins that peer out from porches and doorsteps in the United States and other parts of the world in this month of October? Gourd-like orange fruits inscribed with ghoulish faces and illuminated by candles are a sure sign of the Halloween season. The practice of decorating jack-o'-lanterns, the name comes from an Irish folktale about a man named Stingy Jack. It originated in Ireland. But before I share the legend, here is your next question. What were the original jack-o'-lanterns carved from? So, what about the legend of Stingy Jack? People have been making jack-o'-lanterns at Halloween for centuries. The practice of decorating jack-o'-lanterns, the name comes from an Irish folktale about a man named Stingy Jack. Originated in Ireland. Irish immigrants brought the tradition to America, home of the pumpkin, and it became an integral part of our Halloween festivities. So, according to the story, Stingy Jack invited the devil to have a drink with him. True to his name, Stingy Jack didn't want to pay for his drink, so he convinced the devil to turn himself into a coin that Jack could use to buy their drinks. Once the devil did so, Jack decided to keep the money and put it into his pocket next to a silver cross, which prevented the devil from changing back into his original form. Jack eventually freed the devil under the condition that he would neither bother Jack for 1 year, and should Jack die, he would not claim his soul. So the next year, Jack again tricked the devil into climbing into a tree to pick a piece of fruit. While the devil was up in the tree, Jack carved a sign of the cross into the tree's bark so the devil could not climb back down the tree, until he promised Jack not to bother him for 10 more years. Well, of course, eventually Jack did die. And as the legend goes, God would not allow such an unsavory figure into heaven. And the devil, upset by the trick Jack had played on him and keeping his word not to claim his soul, would not allow Jack into hell. He sent Jack off into the dark night with only a burning coal to light his way. Jack put the coal into a carved-out turnip and has been roaming the earth ever since. The Irish began to refer to this ghostly figure as Jack of the Lantern, and then simply Jack-o'-lantern. In Ireland and Scotland, people began to make their own versions of jack-o'-lanterns by carving scary faces into into turnips or potatoes, and placing them into windows or near stores and doors to frighten away Stingy Jack and other wandering evil spirits. In England, large beets are used. Immigrants from these countries brought the jack-o'-lantern tradition with them when they came to the United States from a potato famine. They soon found that the pumpkin, which was a native fruit to America, made the perfect jack-o'-lanterns. So here's another did you know? The original jack-o'-lanterns were carved from turnips, potatoes, and beets. So let's talk a minute about that emblem and that iconic figure of witches and black cats. Witches are perceived as evil beings by the early Christians in Europe. Black cats was supposedly the spirit of the witch. Today's Halloween ghosts are often depicted as more fearsome and malevolent than they were a long time ago. And our customs are more and more superstitious and scarier as well. We avoid crossing paths with black cats, afraid that they might bring us bad luck. The idea has its roots in the Middle Ages, where people believed that witches avoided detection by turning themselves into black cats. Others believed that the witch's black cats was the spirit of the witch. Now, I mentioned earlier about that bobbing for apples kind of thing, fill up a pail of water, throw some apples in there, put your hands behind your back and see if you can pull up an apple with your teeth and mouth. Well, in fact, it began as a British courting ritual, popular among young ladies and their potential beaux. And there are several versions of that game. So, for one, each apple was assigned to a potential mate. The bobber would attempt to bite into the apple that's named for their young man that she desired. If it only took her one try, then the two of them were destined for romance. If she succeeded with her second attempt, he would court her, but their love would fade. If it took 3 tries, their relationship was doomed. Another approach to the game was a race to be the first to bite an apple. The first to emerge with the apple successfully would be the first to marry. A related superstition suggests that if a girl put the apple she had bitten underneath of her pillow at night, she would see her future soulmate in her dreams that night. So, here's our next question. True or false? More candy is sold during the Halloween season than Valentine's Day. Remember, leave your response in the comments section down below. True or false? Halloween comes to America. Celebration of Halloween was extremely limited in the colonial New England because of rigid Protestant belief systems there. Halloween was much more common in Maryland because it was a southern colony. As the beliefs and customs of different European ethnic groups, as well as the American Indians, meshed together, a distinct version of Halloween began to evolve. The first celebration included play parties, public events held to celebrate the harvest, where neighbors would share stories of the dead, tell each other's fortunes, dance, and sing. Colonial Halloween festivities also featured the telling of ghost stories and mischief making of all kinds. By the middle of the 19th century, annual autumn festivities were common, but Halloween was not yet celebrated everywhere in the country. In the second half of the 19th century, America was flooded with new immigrants. These new immigrants, especially the millions of Irish fleeing the Irish potato famine, popularized the celebration of Halloween nationally. In the late 1800s, there was a move in America to mold Halloween into a holiday that was more community and neighborly get-together than about ghosts, pranks, and witchcraft. At the turn of century, Halloween parties for both children and adults became the most common way to celebrate the day. Parties focused on games, foods of the season, and festive costumes. Parents were encouraged by newspaper and community leaders to take anything frightening or grotesque out of Halloween celebrations. Because of these efforts, Halloween lost most of its superstitious and religious overtones by the beginning of the 20th century. By the 1920s and 1930s, Halloween had become a secular but a community-centered holiday, with parades and town Halloween parties as the featured entertainment. Despite the best efforts, though, of many schools and communities, vandalism seemed to be on the rise and plague many communities during this time of year. Between the years of 1920 and 1950, the century-old practice of trick-or-treating was revived. Trick-or-treating was a relatively inexpensive way for an entire community to share the Halloween celebration. In theory, parents and families could also prevent tricks being played on them by providing the neighborhood children with small treats. Thus, a new American tradition was born, and it has continued to grow. Today, Americans spend an estimated $6 billion, 6 billion, million with a B, $6 billion on Halloween, making it the country's second largest commercial holiday next to, you know what, jingle bells, next to Christmas. Here's a did you know. 1/4 of all the candy sold annually in the United States is purchased on, you got it, Halloween. So here's the billion-dollar question. Again, million with the B. Is there a satanic connection to Halloween? On page 96 of the Satanic Bible, Anton LaVey, who established the religion and the organized and legalized Church of Satan in 1966, wrote this, and I quote, "After one's own birthday, the two major satanic holidays are Walpurgisnacht and Halloween." He also has been quoted as saying, and I quote, "I am glad that Christian parents let their children worship the devil at least one night of the year. Welcome to Halloween." End of quote. Here's a statement from the Church of Satan. They were asked, is Halloween important to Satanists? This is their response. "We see this holiday as the night when the mundane folk try to reach down inside and touch the darkness, which for Satanists, it's a daily mode of existence. Particularly in the United States, Halloween is a time for celebrating monster films, wearing costumes, and evoking the thrill of fun fear. Children of all ages can indulge their fantasies by donning costumes that allow for intense role-playing and the intense release of their demonic cores, the parts of their personalities that are often hidden from their friends, co-workers, and their families. Though there are traditions making this an occasion for recalling the dead, it has been popularized as a time to play with that which historically were fears directed towards what were thought to be unique spirits of the departed. And the grand traditional question, trick or treat, has become a means for fulfilling an indulgence in sweets without the need to resort to the oppositional coercion. Satanists, we embrace what this holiday has become and do not feel the need to be tied to ancient practices. This night we smile at the amateur explorers of their own inner darkness, for we know that they enjoy and will enjoy their brief dip into the pool of the shadow world. We encourage their fantasies, the candied indulgence, and the wide-ranging evocation of dead spirits, even if it's but once a year. For the rest of the time, when those not of our meta-tribe shake their heads in wonder at us, we can point that they may find some understanding by examining their own Hallows Eve doing. But we generally find it simpler to just say, think of the Addams family, and you'll begin to see what we're about. Now, you probably say, well, how about those who just say, you know what? We celebrate Halloween. I mean, what's the big deal? It's a lot of fun. We dress our kids up in costumes with Bible characters and fairies and good figures. You know, we don't dress up in ghosts and demons and scary things. There's no harm in it. Well, in part 2 of our series on Halloween, we're going to look at the trick and the treat. So once again, please be sure that you click that thumbs up button, and also be sure to go down below and subscribe to this channel. We will be looking at part 2 of A Trick Not a Treat coming up. Leave any comments behind. Please be sure that you post them. It's always a great blessing to see your comments, as well as for others to see your comments too. This is an interactive study. So until the next time, part 2 is coming up. Stay tuned. I'll keep you posted.